Hello everyone, wherever you are and whenever you are. Here with another journal entry here. Just wanted to once again keep you all in the loop here. I appreciate your patience and thanks for hanging in there. I'm currently attempting to record this video here. So far so good from my wife's laptop. So I've downloaded the necessary software, and I'm hoping to give it a trial run at recording some leagues this coming weekend. So hopefully, starting next week, the first full week of February, hopefully we will be back in action here, producing content back onto the regular, if all goes well. I have not attempted to record actual gameplay yet, so hopefully the laptop will be up to the task, and we can keep on keeping on here until I manage to get my primary PC back up and operational. So, I believe when I checked in last, I mentioned briefly that I had that I went to a Legacy event, and that happened last weekend. It was down in, Frederick, Maryland. So, big shout out to Game Hunters down there in Frederick, Maryland. Super fun event. It was absolutely free. Of course, that didn't stop me from picking up a few things while I was there to help support the store. Had a blast, had an absolute blast. I'll go over my extremely unimpressive record and matchups briefly here in this video. So, if you're not into Legacy, or that's not your cup of tea or anything like that, well then I guess you can go ahead and duck out here. Just know that, like I said, hopefully, if everything goes well, I'm going to get some recording done this coming weekend, and we will be back at it the following week. So I just want to start off by saying that I had an absolute blast. The deck that you see here on the screen is the deck that I piloted, all except for a few changes in the sideboard. So I'm not really going to go over this card for card, but the event was a lot of fun. Playing the deck was a lot of fun. As you can see, the main deck here was constructed by Mr. Max Gilmore. It was a deck list that I copied off of his an interview that he had on the Leaving a Legacy podcast. If you guys are into Legacy and have not heard of the Leaving a Legacy podcast, I would highly recommend it. It's kind of what got me into the format. I'm listening to it a little over a year now, and Pat and Jerry are extremely entertaining. Some all around good guys, and they have a lot of fun. So, the deck felt really good to play. I remember there was an interview that they did on the LAL podcast a while ago, with a gentleman, and I cannot remember his name off the top of my head, but I remember him saying that the Esper Stoneblade archetype is pretty much one of Legacy's like 50/50 kind of decks. So it's definitely not a deck that gives you any free wins, and I certainly did not get any at the event. But it was good to play. It was good to get out there and experience a new format. Just kind of get thrown into it. And so my big takeaway from the event was first time ever really, first of all, playing Legacy in paper. And the first ever event that I've played it at. I've played a couple miscellaneous games online with other decks, not this one. But I constantly felt like I was making decisions, but I wasn't sure, due to cards like Brainstorm and Ponder, I wasn't sure whether the decisions that I was making were the correct ones. That was kind of my takeaway. So for those of you who might be hanging in here, who are here for modern stuff or whatever, definitely getting the hang of those big bad cantrips is going to take quite a bit of practice, but it was fun, kind of getting to just feel the power level behind those cards, and kind of get a little taste of what we're missing out on with only having access to Opt and Serum Visions and Sleight of Hand and things like that in Modern. But either way, the deck felt, I guess pretty strong, but I think when the strongest thing that you're doing is basically playing a True Name Nemesis and putting equipment on it, it takes, I think it hinges on a lot of play skill, which I certainly did not have, admittedly, at this event. But yep, here's a quick glance at the sideboard. The only differences between this deck and the one that I actually played was I replaced the Meddling Mages with Aethersworn Canonist, and I did not have a Sword of Feast and Famine. I had something else, and I cannot remember off the top of my head what that was. But oh, just on a side note, this is an absolutely filthy card. Every time I cast into Torok, I felt like I wanted to be playing a deck that played these in the main deck instead. But either way, it was a really good introduction to the format. So I'll just run down a quick little recap here. So again, I went down to visit my old college roommate. Him and I hang out periodically, and so I traveled down to Maryland, and I brought he put together Infect. I let him borrow a couple of my tropical islands, and so we both managed to go to this event. Neither of us really have effectively ever played before, as I know that I had mentioned now probably several times, but either way. So spoiler alert, it was a 6-round event, and I kind of walked away from that feeling like that was the perfect number of rounds, at least for me. I don't play at a lot of big events. Previously I'd been to like a handful of the SCG. I don't even remember whether they were classics or opens, to be honest. I do not remember which ones they were, but I've been to a couple of modern events at the SCG level, and they were fun. But definitely by the end of the day, you really start to feel it. But yeah, 6 rounds felt really nice. I had my water and my Gatorade and my little snacks and things like that, so I was ready to go. But yeah, so half of my games were against, this is a spoiler, I guess, were against Sneak and Show. So that was kind of an interesting anomaly, or whatever. Maybe you could call it. It was there were about, I think, like 52 or 54 people there at the event. So it was a decent size for a Sunday evening. But so all right, we'll just run through the rounds real quick here. So my round 1 opponent, I started right off playing against Sneak and Show. In game 1, I kind of took his hand apart a bit with some discard and things like that, and I was pressuring him just a little bit. But then he hit me with a Gristlebrand off of a sneak attack, and went up to 17 life, I think it was, and I think I had a True Name and a Stoneforge Mystic in play. And then he just kind of proceeded to scoop without drawing the cards off of Gristlebrand. I don't know, maybe he thought that it would just put him back down into a range that I would like kill him in 2 turns or whatever, but I thought that was odd. But hey, I'm the one unfamiliar with the Legacy format, so I didn't think much of it. I was like, okay, cool. We'll go to game 2. So let's see, game 2, I kind of just like countered his stuff, made him discard some more things. I got him with 2 hymns, I think, back to back, and I was just kind of chipping in with a Snapcaster Mage and a Strix, and eventually just got there. So I came out of my first round ever in Legacy with a nice solid 2-0, and that's where I should have retired. So I could have been undefeated in my Legacy career. But of course, there was another round, and this guy was playing a blue-black Delver deck, and he was playing a couple games down from me the first round, and I did manage to see a little bit about what he was on, but it did not prevent me from getting stifled immediately in our first game, and never having been on the receiving end of that card before, or even really thinking to play around it, I did Force of Will it, pitching a Supreme Verdict, because I think my hand was a little land light. Don't know whether that's correct. I'm sure, like most decisions you can make in a game of Magic, it depends on a lot of different factors. But all I knew is that in that moment, I really didn't want him getting that land destroyed effectively for 1 mana. The rest of the game pretty much devolved into him landing a Delver. I think I swords his Delver, and then he played a Gurmag, hit me for 5, and then another Gurmag the following turn, and I think I was at 12, and I kind of picked him up. So game 2 was really long and grindy there. I managed to land a Jace and brainstormed for several turns, and by the time he finally got rid of my Jace. I think he ticked up a Ratchet Bomb eventually, and I kind of immediately just played a second Jace. And even though he had 2 Bitter Blossoms in play, I had a Batterskull on a Germ, a Strix, and I had played and flashed back a Lingering Souls at that point, and he decided that we were going to... I think I had just played a Stoneforge and was searching out my my Jitty, whatever you want to call it, that Umezawa's thing, Umezawa's little poker there, and so I was getting that out of my deck, and he just kind of scooped, and he's like, yeah, I probably should have done it like 10 minutes ago. And if he had done it 10 minutes ago, maybe we would have had a chance to finish our game 3 in a more conclusive manner anyway. So we only had 8 minutes left going into game 3, and I had a nice hand. I think I had a turn 1 discard spell into, or it was either a turn 1 discard spell or a cantrip into a Bitter Blossom into a True Name Nemesis, and I thought to I think that was after a Multa 6, and so I thought to myself, well, this will be nice, a nice potential way to end the game relatively quickly, if because that's kind of what I would need to do. So I kept the hand, and he unfortunately had a Daze for my Bitter Blossom, which again didn't really think to, not experienced enough in the format to really play around. And then after that, he cast 2 Sinkholes in a row. And I was just out of the game after that. I was like, you know what? All right, I'm just gonna. So I just scooped to him because there was. I figured I'd preserve my sanity there and save myself a couple minutes there, so we can have a little more time in between round or whatever. So in that match, I do remember there was one pretty bad misplay I made where I had Thoughtseize or Inquisitioned him at one point, and he had a portion of his hand face up on the table, and I top-decked a True Name Nemesis, and I got really excited, and I slammed it. And then I immediately looked on his side of the table, and was like, ah, crap, I totally forgot that he had a face-up Toxic Deluge over there, and so that promptly took care of my True Name Nemesis. So my excitement was short-lived, but alas and alack. So, moving on to round number 3, I had the exact opposite of my first round. This was against my second Sneak and Show opponent. So, game 1, I Thoughtseized him, and he saw main deck Blood Moon there, so of course I had to take that, because playing this three-color deck, don't really have too many ways to deal with that if it would resolve, because my EE was not in hand at the time, and I only play 1 basic Plains, so it would have been difficult, if not impossible, to get off this Council's Judgment to remove it. So I took the Moon, he proceeds to top deck a second Moon, and then I had to force it. I think I force pitched Jace there, and then I was left with, I think, like a land and a Jit in hand, and so we both were extremely low on resources, and he unfortunately just he drew out of it faster. He started drawing some cantrips and everything, and yep, he just did his thing. He drew his sneak attack, got an Emrakul down, and then played Drip Griselbrand, and that was that. So game 2, I went ahead and played a Flooded Strand and passed the turn. Then he played a turn 1 Defense Grid off of a City of Traders, and I was not really prepared for that card. For the record, I did not really do a whole lot of research or any sideboarding guides or anything like that before the tournament. I just kind of thought, well, it's a free event anyway. You know, I'm here to have fun, so I'm just gonna dive in. And so, did not anticipate Defense Grid. So I did draw into a Pithing Needle, or Pithing Needle, whatever it is, and I played it named Sneak Attack, of course, and then he proceeded to play an Arcane Artisan the very next turn, which is kind of essentially the same card, but one's just a creature and a little different. If you're unaware and still listening to my rant here, so then he just went ahead and proceeded to do his thing before I could draw one of my 2 Swords to Plowshares. I did manage to get the Engineered Explosives in play, and I had a Force of Will at one point, so I could have kind of arranged it in a way to try and like blow up my Engineered Explosives on his turn in response to his drawing a card and making a token with the Arcane Artisan, and then Brainstorm, hope to hit either a blue card for a Force of Will if necessary, or a one of my 2 remaining Swords to Plowshares, because I took 2 out in pretty much all my Sneak and Show matchups, but I kept a couple in, especially after seeing the guy bring in the Arcane Artisan. Apparently he was on the Jerry Me special there. So that was that. Lost that one 0-2 relatively quickly. So here's where the wheels were just kind of starting to come off after that first loss, unfortunately. So my next match was against a guy who just went basic mountain go. I'm like, okay. So I used my very limited knowledge of the Legacy format to just kind of assume, oh, maybe he's on burn or something like that. No, this guy proceeds to play a Grindstone, and I kind of immediately know what's up, but I'm not extremely familiar with the deck. I know the vague outline. So he did get the Grindstone in play. He had 2 Grindstones actually, a Lotus Petal and 3 lands, and then he had a Painter Servant in play, and it was my turn. And I think I drew a Swords to Plowshares, and I wasn't quite thinking properly. So this was the one, other than the True Name play that I mentioned, that one didn't necessarily cost me a game, but this was the one thing in the whole tournament that I recognized, that where I made I just missed the line, made a poor decision or whatever, didn't act, and immediately lost the game because of it. So what I should have done was play the Council's Judgment, targeting his Painter's Servant, and then in response, when he had just enough mana to crack or to use one of his Grindstones, in response to that, I should have swords the Painter's Servant before he would be able to mill my entire deck. But I either just didn't see the line, or maybe I was a little demoralized at the time. I don't know exactly what went through my mind, but I didn't see it and I didn't do it. So my thought process I distinctly remember seeing is like, okay, I know how this ends, but I'm going to swords it anyway, just so he shows me the combo and I can ask him a question or see how much information he gives me or whatever. So I did that and I lost there. So game 2 was long and grindy. He had played an early Aethersworn Canonist, and then a Painter's Servant, and he was kind of chipping away in there with the Canonist, and he eventually got a Goblin Welder into play and was like throwing things around, and I had my needle out naming Grindstone, so I was trying to pay attention to my own graveyard to prevent any artifacts from going into there, but I couldn't get, I think I kept in all my removal except for the Supreme Verdict. I boarded out the Supreme Verdict, and it got to the point where he ended up having, I think, two Goblin Welders in play, a Painter's Servant, and then he also played a Smuggler's Copter, and just kept looping the Copter. Like anytime I would try and remove the Smuggler's Copter, he would just loop it back from the graveyard with the Goblin Welders, and I wasn't ready for that. Deck doesn't really, other than the Surgical Extractions, which I did not bring in, which may or may not be correct, no idea. I just didn't have really a way to combat that, and I don't know if it would have been worth keeping the Verdict in or not, but I didn't see the Goblin Welder game 1, and so I was definitely unaware of the deck, and I ended up paying for my lack of knowledge there, because eventually I just couldn't get through. I ended up drawing a Batterskull at some point, but then it just seemed like he was just going to get me, and I showed him my hand, and extended my hand to say good game, and he said, oh, well, your Batterskull's blue, because he had a Painter's Servant in place. Like, you could pitch that to Force of Will and play the Force of Will, and I'm like, I was looking at the board state, and I was kind of like, yeah, I'm kind of dead, but alright, whatever, it'll give me another turn, so I did it. And yeah, just proceeded to lose from there. It was either die to him just recurring the Smuggler's Copter over and over and over again, or use my, what was it? Use somehow, a Strix. I think I had a Baleful Strix, that he somehow could get into my graveyard or I had a Baleful Strix in my graveyard or something that he could then use that I had to play to block a Copter to save me from lethal, that he could then just switch the needle for, with his Goblin Welder, and I would just die to the combo. So, yeah, it was between a rock and a hard place, kind of a thing. Again, it's a shame I punted game 1, but went down 0-2 there as well. Round 5 was against my third Sneak and Show match. This one ended in a 1-1 draw. Game 1, my hand just did not have any relevant interaction in it for his deck, and I was shown and told, I guess, as they say. I didn't really put up a fight. Game 2, I had plenty of discard and counter magic, and Batterskull eventually got me there. And our Game 3 unfortunately went to time. I had a Strix, 2 Souls tokens on the board with him at 11, and I think I had 5 cards in hand. Every single one of them was a counter spell. So if we would have had a little more time, I think I would have eked that one out. I might have had an active Jace as well. I can't remember. I think I did. So yeah, unfortunately, if I would have had 5 more minutes, I think we probably could have. I probably could have won that one there, because I also had his had a Pithing Needle on his sneak attack that he had in play and everything. So he did have a Boseiju though. So if he would have drew that, he could have got around my counter magic and forced a Sneak and Show through or whatever. But so that was too bad. But again, at that point it was round 5, and I was just there for fun anyway. But that was a close game. And then finally the sixth and final round, I sat down and my opponent's basically just like, "Yep, you got the 2-0," and I was like, "Wait, what are you talking about?" And he's like, "I'm gonna play a different deck, if you don't mind." I'm like, "Okay, sure, whatever." Last round of the tournament. So this guy proceeds to play his Modern Humans deck against this deck, the Legacy deck that's just a pile of removal and creatures that he can't really interact with that well. Not that the Humans deck interacts too much. Well, that's not true. That's not true. They have Reflector Mage and stuff like that. But anyway, first thought it was a Legacy Humans deck, but then nope, it was just at the modern power level. So of course, it was all fun and games for him until I landed a True Name Nemesis, and then found a Stoneforge Mystic and got a Batterskull and a Jit and da. Turns out Swords, Plowshares, Baleful Strix, cards like that are good against the creature deck there. So even though he gave me the 2-0, I did end up also beating him 2-0. The second game was pretty gut-wrenching, just kind of snap swords into, just didn't really Strix to block his Mantis Riders and stuff like that. So yeah, he was just not having a good time of it by the end of there. But no, he was cool. And in case anyone was wondering, yes, Stoneforge Mystic is confirmed busted in Modern. No, I'm joking. I think that card could definitely be unbanned with little to no repercussions when people are putting 9 flying power onto the board. Turn 1 with their turn 2, turn 3 with their Arclight Phoenix, and you can't even get the Batterskull into play until turn 3. So yeah, I think she'd be all right. But so that was my probably longer than it needed to be tournament report. So if you're still there, if you still made it through all of this, thanks a lot for listening. Again, I had a blast at the tournament, so shout out again to Game Hunters in Frederick, Maryland. Apparently, if you're in the area and you don't know, they do Legacy, I think they were saying every Friday night, or every Sunday night at 5, I believe. So if I lived down there in the area, I would definitely be there. Because the guys there were super cool, and everyone there was pretty chill. I didn't see or overhear any nastiness or anything like that. No drama as far as I could tell that can sometimes pop up at these events. And I know the Legacy crowds are probably a little older, maybe a little bit of a different dynamic there, but it was a blast. Oh, I only had one judge call the whole day, and it was towards the end of the day, my third match against Sneak and Show. I went to resolve a Ponder, and I accidentally flopped my hand over and realized, oh crap, it was getting a little humid in there and everything, and my hands were shaking a little bit, and I accidentally had what looked like 4 cards in my hand, and so we called the judge over, and I said, oh dang, sorry, I went to Ponder, and I realized I had 4 cards, and I had already looked at them, and he's like, fan your hand, and I did, and it was like, oh, there's actually 5 cards there. So yeah, that was that was a blunder. But in my defense, all day I used black KMC Hypermat sleeves, and so I was kind of trying to check in the glare of the light, just to double check how many cards I had whenever I would brainstorm or ponder. because every now and then it was hard. It was a little deceptive and hard to see, and I just kind of missed that. I think the humidity, a couple cards stuck together, and that was that. But it was opponent was real cool about it, of course, and the resolution was fairly straightforward. So, yeah, I hope to do some more things in the Legacy realm here, moving forward, because the format is a lot of fun, and I haven't played Modern since the in a couple weeks now, I guess, since the KCI ban. Not that we ever really played against that deck on the channel or anything, so I never really got to taste that the power of that deck. But again, I'm also not a grinder. You know, as you probably know here, if you've been on this channel for some time listening to me ramble on and on, I play when I have the time, and pretty much upload whatever I'm playing whenever I sit down to play it. So I did, however, register today for SCG Syracuse coming up, so I'm super stoked for that. Not sure whether I'll play this deck or play one of these other decks. Tell you what, if I would have had the Blue-Black Death Shadow deck with me last weekend, I think this deck would have went. I think I would have maybe walked all over those Sneak and Show matchups, and maybe done a little better overall. I think this deck has a bit more of a proactive game plan than the Blue-Black or than the Esper Stoneblade list. You can actually deal some serious damage instead of just chipping in for a few hits here and there with Strixes and Souls tokens and Snapcaster Mages and hoping you land your Batterskull. So, but yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. And if the time permits it while I'm there, and if I have the ability to take some notes, maybe I'll try and capture another little tournament recap there, just kind of not just the round by round, whatever. Not sure if anyone's interested in that or not, but we'll see. We'll see if I have the time and the ability and the patience to do it. So once again, if you've made it this far, thanks for listening. We'll be back in action here next week. So thank you all so much for your support, and I will catch you in some leagues here a little later on. All right.